All right, welcome to SketchUp Talk, the SketchUpiest podcast you can possibly listen to. I'm your host, Aaron, and with me today is Mike Tadros, one of SketchUp's celebrity all-star product managers. Hi, Mike.
I liked your first intro better.
I know. I have to admit, technical difficulties due to myself. I forgot to unmute, so this is our second go-around. We didn't get too far into it, though.
But hello, Aaron, and thank you for having me on the show. And hi, everybody watching and listening.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. So let's start with the term product manager. We have a couple of guests on that claim the title product manager. What is a product manager, Mike?
What is a product manager?
Yeah.
Oh boy, so many fun ways to define that. I like to think of product manager as someone on the team responsible for owning the failures and delegating the success. But yeah, I think as a product manager, it's our responsibility to essentially set the product vision and roadmap for the products that we're responsible for, and then work with all of the different cross-functional teams across the entire organization, from sales to marketing to knowledge and support to design and engineering and legal and finance, to make sure, that we're building the right thing for customers ultimately, and that we have a path for getting those products to market in a way that allow our customers to buy those things and use those things and be successful in their professional workflows using our products and enjoy using our products along the way. So,
that was a good answer.
Why, thank you. I spend a little bit of time thinking about that stuff these days.
How to position things.
Yeah, and being a product manager.
That is, it's a one of the things I want to key in on. One of the things you said, and that is it's part of a team. Because I mean, I did product management before I had this position at Trimble, and by yourself, a product manager really doesn't. I'm not playing anything down. It's a very important role, but it's really a part of being a hub in a team. Like you by yourself don't put anything out for sales. You don't create any code. You don't. So it's. But at the same time, it's like that central point of all these pieces that come together to make software.
Yeah, it's management. It's management, and it's leadership, and it's communication. It's a lot of intangible stuff. It's a lot of glue to make sure that, you don't have misalignment of expectations or miscommunications that could ultimately result in derailing projects or having projects take a lot longer or get to a place where you realize you've built the wrong thing. And so while the output maybe isn't as tangible at times as, I'm just giving some examples here, either code, if you're looking at it kind of from an engineering perspective, or design mock-ups or prototypes if you're looking at it from a design perspective, or a blog post or marketing collateral if you're looking at it from a marketing perspective. There's a lot of work.
Nothing what I said was meant to minimize.
And I'm not implying there was. I'm just for those who are interested. There's a lot of work that goes into helping to ensure that, and it's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah,
it's a lot of responsibility. You're taking on a lot of different kinds of responsibilities too. You're taking on the responsibility to deliver something of value to our customers. You're taking on the responsibility to deliver value back in exchange to the organization. You're taking on the responsibility to help, again, ensure that expectations and communications are aligned across all of the different cross-functional teams within an organization. And you're taking on the responsibility for your individual product sub-team and the engineers and the QA and the designers who spend all day, every day, pouring their energy and their heart and their soul and their passion into ultimately building what what you've determined is the next most important thing for them to be working on. And so all of those responsibilities kind of come to bear on the work that we do.
That's awesome. And it really is. It is a great position. I thoroughly enjoyed my time in product management.
It's always interesting.
That's true. I don't remember a whole lot of boring days.
It's never boring. It's never boring.
So I'm going to ask you a big question. Can you give us a list of all the products that you manage? I hopefully can remember them all.
I can try, but I'll probably forget one and then feel terrible afterwards. So starting with the Viewer Portfolio. The Viewer Portfolio is the product that I'm currently directly managing. And so I like to think of that as really a portfolio of close to now 7 different products. And I think of that because the Viewer lives in a lot of different places. It has a lot of incarnations.
Absolutely.
And so we have our mobile viewer, which works across both iOS and Android phones and tablets. And when you really break that out and you really take a look at what it takes to build those products, at the end of the day, those really are 4 different products.
Right. And I think a lot of people don't catch that because you go onto a sales page and it just says mobile for viewer or viewer for mobile.
Sure.
And it's one thing, but it is actually different products that have to get created, coded, tested, verified separately.
Yeah.
And then distributed separately on different stores.
The documentation is different. The designs are different. The engineering in some ways is different. The product itself is different. I think customers use the product on different devices and different operating systems differently. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, there's quite a bit of complexity if you just look at that. But we've also, in recent years, launched viewer products in the XR space as well, both for Hololens. Consider that kind of a category of immersive AR. And then VR as well, desktop VR. And so the desktop VR app works across UWP VR applications. So that's the kind of Windows holographic device ecosystem of desktop VR headsets. And then also we support the HTC Vive family of devices and Oculus Rift desktop VR family of devices as well. And so
each of those, again, different code, different release, different platform.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways that's 2 products, in some ways it's 3 products. The Venn diagrams are always kind of changing. That's every day that space changes. But if we think of it, you offered that these applications have to be distributed through app stores, right? So one way to think about it is the fact that we have a version of our application that we distribute through the Microsoft Store, and that app runs on both the Microsoft HoloLens as well as all of the UWP VR headsets. The other VR app that we distribute through SketchUp.com, and that's the desktop VR installer or executable that people can run, and that supports both HTC and Oculus. So if I think about it from that perspective, it's kind of 2 products, but the other way to think about it as 2 products is that HoloLens is just such a unique platform compared to VR. Right. AR is such a uniquely different experience compared to VR. The things people want to do when they're wearing an immersive AR headset are very different than the things people want to do when they're wearing an immersive VR headset.
For sure.
And so that's another way to kind of think about it more from a customer perspective.
It's a handful of products, no matter which way you cut.
Yeah, so there's that. So that keeps us a little bit busy. And then when I started at Trimble, almost 7 years ago now, some of the first products that I was working on were Extension Warehouse. So I was the product manager who kind of took Extension Warehouse from nothing really, but an idea to V1. So that was amazing. And then we were also working on, at the time, re-platforming 3D Warehouse. So rebuilding 3D Warehouse from the ground up. When Trimble acquired the SketchUp portfolio of products from Google, 3D Warehouse obviously came along for the ride. The old Google 3D Warehouse came along for the ride. But the old Google 3D Warehouse was fully built on Google cloud infrastructure that Google was hosting. And they very generously continued to host 3D Warehouse for a couple of years, but there was a timeline. There was a point in time at which we were responsible for relaunching 3D Warehouse on new infrastructure. So we literally had to rebuild 3D Warehouse from the ground up. And that was another really incredible experience. And I then continued to manage Extension Warehouse for a while, continued to manage 3D Warehouse for a while longer than that. And at that same time began working on the first version of the SketchUp Viewer app, which at the time was targeting iOS tablets. So the V1 SketchUp Viewer was an iOS tablet only viewer. And so that portfolio has come a long way.
It's grown.
So yeah, took a little bit of work to get there, but yeah. Thank you for being patient.
We got there. That's the important part. It doesn't matter what it took, as long as you get there.
Yeah, thank you for your patience.
So I want to dive in a little bit to what led up to working as a product manager at Trimble. But I just wanted to call out, you mentioned 7 years as of the time of this recording, because this lives in perpetuity. This is immortal. So
fair point. It's January 9th, 2020.
As of then,
I started here in February of 2013. Yes, so, February 2013.
So I actually met you before either of us worked at SketchUp at a SketchUp event at Basecamp in Boulder, 2016? No, 14.
Well, if it was before either of us worked here, it would have been 2012.
2012.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
Yeah.
Dang, never mind. I feel old. I won't talk about that.
It would have been October. I think it was October 2012 was that year's Basecamp.
Yeah, and you were there talking about Igloo.
I was.
And I was there talking about Build Edge.
Yep.
And yeah, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Dang, I don't want to talk about that anymore. So... So
are we done with that?
Yeah.
So that was quick. Okay.
Yeah, that's too far back. I don't want to talk about that.
28 years of history in 30 seconds.
But you actually had, so working at SketchUp for those years, but you had a life before still working in the SketchUp space.
Yeah.
And so that's immortalized too.
It is.
Because I refreshed myself and saw you in a cowboy outfit yesterday.
Yep.
So let's hear about that thing.
The other podcast that I was on a long time ago. Yeah. So prior to joining Trimble, I, along with a couple co-founders, Alex and John, founded Igloo Studios. This was back in 2004. Mm. And for almost 10 years, we did all manner of different things to help support SketchUp as a sort of ecosystem company, a service provider of sorts. And yeah, we got our hands in all sorts of fun pots. From training was really how it started. At that time, back in 2004, I was working at an architecture firm in Culver City, California, and a buddy of mine actually had called me up. Curran, if you're watching, hi, and thank you. He and I had worked together at a previous firm in Culver City, so we keep winding the timeline back.
It's like a flashback in a flashback.
How long is it going to take to play this back forward? So Curran and I were working at an architecture firm in LA. We both went off to different firms. I'm working now at another architecture firm in LA. And he calls me up one day and says, "You got to come over. When you're done work, you've got to come over. You've got to see this." We're both working, by the way, as CAD monkeys, right?
Right.
Full on like visualization, 3D modeling, rendering CAD monkeys using 3D Studio Max and AutoCAD and, you know, the listed that Photoshop, Illustrator, all that stuff. So I do, you know, if
Piqued your interest.
he was excited, right? So like, all right, I'm coming. So I get over to his studio and, you know, I can still remember, he like opens the door, we walk up to the thing, he sits down at his computer, he's like, you're not going to believe this. And I'm looking at his computer screen and he's got a SketchUp model open. I don't know what the app is. I don't know that this is SketchUp.
Some 3D CAD model.
Yeah. And he takes the rectangle tool and he draws a rectangle directly onto a wall surface, then grabs the push-pull tool and pulls it out into a shelf. And there was like a part of my brain that just like melted, right? I'm just like, what did you just do? Right. And so, yeah, that began a 20-year-long now love affair with SketchUp. But I immediately went home that night. At the time I was moonlighting too, you know, trying to scratch together a little extra cash doing computer modeling and rendering. So there was a moonlighting gig I was working. I remember I obtained a copy of SketchUp and started using it on this project that night, fumbling my way through it. And so that alone is an experience that I still carry with me to this day. It was just those first few hours, you know, from 10 p.m. to 2 in the morning, trying to scrap this model together, having never used SketchUp before. Mm-hmm. I can still remember it too. Like half of it was blue, half of it was white, because all these faces were like, I would scream if I saw that model now. But anyway, point is that I then started using it professionally at the architecture firm where I was working. Projects were going by much faster. Project managers were like, what is going on? How are we ahead of schedule? I could tell a 20-minute long story just about that, but then started teaching it to other people in the office after I kind of got a grip, and then started trying to send SketchUp models to other architecture firms in the LA area at the time who we were collaborating with. You know, we would sometimes get brought in as the design firm, but then the executive architecture firm who was responsible for other aspects of the project, we would be sending them files and models. So I'd send a SketchUp file as an email attachment, and the answer I'd get back is, I can't open this file. What am I supposed to do with this? And so I would send, yeah, exactly. So I would send them a link to the SketchUp website, which at the time had a gallery with imagery. It was nice.
I remember it.
Yeah. Just track homes and dog houses and surf shacks and stuff, right? And so so people would look at that and say, you know, we're not entirely sure this software is for us, right? Mm-hmm. We work on high-end kind of contemporary residential and commercial projects. It's like, yeah, me too. That's what I'm sending you a SketchUp model of. Come on, it's great for that stuff. You're talking about clean lines, rectangles, is perfect. And so what I kind of had the idea to do is to start sending images of the projects that we were working on at our firm to SketchUp to get some case study imagery that represented that kind of Southern California contemporary architectural vibe that our firm was mostly working on. A lot of other firms in that area were working on as well. And that then, over a series of months, you know, some email exchanges, oh, these are great, you know, if you have anything else, feel free to send it over, that kind of thing, led to me getting a call at work some number of months later, maybe 4 or 5, 6 months later, asking if I had any interest in teaching SketchUp to other people. And it was kind of what I was doing at my firm already, you know, like trying to teach everyone else how to use this software, which is now just totally caught on. Like everything we were doing in the firm by this point was all being done in SketchUp. And so, yeah, the person on the other end of the line was Mark Carvalho, who at the time was working at Atlas Software. This is back in 2004. And he was trying to build a training department at SketchUp, so that they could have more people kind of spread out throughout the country teaching SketchUp classes to other architects and designers. And so, yeah, bunch of conversations, interviews, whatever. And next thing I know, I've quit my job at the architecture firm. I've now started a company of my own with a buddy from college, Alex, and that was us founding Igloo Studios. And really our first big client was Atlas Software, who was contracting me to fly around the country and teach SketchUp to people. And it was great.
Yeah.
It was really great. It wasn't just the US. We taught in Australia, we taught in Canada. Wow. We had a lot of opportunities to travel, and taught in Hawaii. So that was a really cool time. And did that for about 10 years. That journey had all kinds of fun events, not the least of which was Google acquiring Atlas Software, and then there towards the end having Trimble ultimately acquire the SketchUp Portfolio from Google. But yeah, in addition, for what it's worth, in addition to teaching those live classes, we also kicked off a number of video-based, DVD. Do you remember DVD?
I remember vaguely, yeah.
The DVDs. Yeah, so we had some DVDs that were interactive SketchUp training DVDs. We did, I want to say ultimately 5 of those.
Wow.
Wrote 2 books about SketchUp along the way, with some just embarrassing title. Real World Google SketchUp 7 was the title. That's a great. If
you want to date a book,
oh yeah,
put a version number of software on the title.
If you ever want to limit the sellability of a book
1 year
title,
window, boom.
That was a really smart idea. Made a lot of other really great, spectacular mistakes along the way too, for what that's worth. But yeah, we started up a video tutorial series as well, the SketchUp Show, which I think was somewhere in the neighborhood of 50-something episodes.
Which is still, I mean, it's available, and there's still great information in there.
Alex and John are still cranking out awesome episodes. Yeah. So if you're already on YouTube, Google or search for the SketchUp Show, also available as a video podcast through all of the places, I'm sure, where you would go to get a video podcast. And then spun that into a video-based training site with other training materials, which is also still a very awesome site, SketchUp School. And yeah, what else? We got into contract modeling, a lot of contract modeling. So still, the late nights spent staring at the computer screen, cranking the model out for the next day's deadline was still very much a thing. And it was interesting too how those things played off each other, because you go to teach the class, and invariably there'd be the person in the class who was like, I'm just going to learn this thing real quick during this 2-hour class, and then I'll be all set to go home and like get everything done for my deadline tomorrow.
Turns out I can't.
And then after 2 hours, they're kind of, so out of curiosity, would it be possible to hire you to model this thing? So that happened, and that turned into a pretty successful contract modeling part of our business as well. And we ended up doing a ton of modeling for Google Earth. Since we were kind of already working with Google on a lot of the training stuff, we started working with Google on a lot of 3D modeling contracts for Google Earth to model historic venues, architecturally significant venues. We modeled a bunch of Olympic venues, a bunch of Major League Baseball stadiums. We got a bunch of cities started. So we did the first 20 buildings for San Francisco, the first 20 buildings for San Diego, like that kind of stuff. So that was really fun. And then maybe the most relevant thing that we did in terms of kind of setting the stage for me joining Trimble was the contract modeling work that we were doing for building product manufacturers. And that work for me too, for what it's worth, is work that really kind of ties the whole story together for me.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember what it was like in 2004 using SketchUp before 3D Warehouse even existed,
Mm-hmm.
right? Before manufacturers, many of them even had 2D CAD files for their products available. I remember what it was like to be on deadline for a project and be working on trying to draw out the kitchen, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and go to a manufacturer's website and get a photograph of a refrigerator, and then sit there and try to draw from scratch like that refrigerator off of a photograph. You're lucky if you have a couple product dimensions to work off of. If you have 2D CAD files, okay, that's better, but still, right?
Right.
And believe it or not, one of the first things we tried to do as Igloo Studios while we were training was go to trade shows. And Suitcase, that's a term for trying to sell to trade show vendors who are there to actually sell things to attendees. But we would do it anyway. And we would walk the aisles and we'd try to talk to building product manufacturers about, hey, what we'd love to do is we'd love to create SketchUp models, 3D computer models of your products that you could then make available for architects and designers who wanted them. Again, you could mail them on CD, right?
Was the reaction from them the same as your earlier reaction talking to architecture people? Like, what up? What are you?
Yeah, and it wasn't surprising necessarily, but it was also, God, such a learning experience. Such a learning experience
Mm-hmm.
about, what are the needs of these potential customers that you're
Right.
really trying to engage with right now. Do they need to supply architects and designers with content about their products? Well, of course they do. But what kind of content are they thinking about right now? They're thinking about printed brochures. Some of them at the time were thinking about how do we get a website
Right.
up and right. And so for us to be talking to someone who doesn't have a website about 3D computer models of it, right?
That's a tough sell,
so you
man.
start to learn.
sell.
You start to learn like, okay, well, if you already have a website and you already are sending out via CD 2D drawings of your products, maybe us talking to you about 3D models isn't such a leap.
Right.
And we did find some of those companies. So we did actually, this was way long time ago, but we did start working with some manufacturers to create SketchUp models of their catalogs. When 3D Warehouse launched, that was a huge game changer.
Mm-hmm.
The conversation totally shifted. Obviously, we had the cred of that being a Google site, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start talking about marketing, you're always talking about Google. When you're talking about marketing, you're talking about Google, and Google ads and everything else. And so we were able to tell a more compelling story about SketchUp content, 3D content being compelling as marketing collateral. And that opened the door. We worked with probably 60 different manufacturers over the course of several years to get their product catalogs modeled in SketchUp.
Wow.
For them and uploaded to 3D Warehouse.
And that was just you two guys that whole time?
No. We had a really great team of people working on these projects, especially when dynamic components were introduced a few years later, and we started creating dynamic components of a lot of these products, windows and doors and appliances, these kinds of things, cabinetry. We did a lot of work with KraftMaid and Marilat, Nanowall, Marvin Windows, Milgard. Like these are some amazing companies to work with too. True Style Doors, another one. But yeah, the process of working with those manufacturers to get their real world products translated into SketchUp models and get them published to 3D Warehouse and maintain that content over time, ton of learning involved there. And so when Trimble acquired the product portfolio, the SketchUp portfolio from Google, I think it's pretty well known now that the focus strategically for Trimble was continues to be increasingly so year after year, focused on the professional market segments.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that shift, there were a lot of more subtle shifts. How is SketchUp a better, more capable tool for members of the professional design community? How is 3D Warehouse a content repository that contains higher quality content of real world building materials and building products? And how are we going to work to engage the manufacturers of those products to create and publish content to 3D Warehouse? So all of those questions are being asked, and the work that we had done to that point, up to 2013, I think was some of the most advanced, most involved work in that area. And so when I joined Trimble at the time, it was really to lead that effort, to lead the effort around 3D Warehouse,
Right.
Not just the replatforming effort that I spoke about earlier, but the effort to really turn 3D Warehouse into a more professional grade repository of professional grade content.
Yeah. Which was what it needed. All right. So this is a special part of the podcast where I want to ask you some questions. We call this How Do You SU? So I got a couple questions here about, you touched on some of these, so some of these would be pretty easy.
Okay.
But I want to we're going to get a little more intimate with your relationship with SketchUp.
Okay.
So this is going to harken back to something you mentioned, but
It's a tawdry.
That's right.
Tawdry past. Yeah.
It's going to get blue. Right. Do you recall your first SketchUp model? You kind of mentioned it. Do you remember what that was that you were working on at 10 o'clock that night?
I do. It was a project. So the concept was bar by day and night, most days and nights, but fashion show runway occasionally.
All right. It's like a transformer building.
Well, the idea was that there'd be this big, like U-shaped bar that kind of went to a back of house that if you walked in, you would just assume this was just a big, giant U-shaped bar. But if you kind of cleared the space out, back of house turned into like a U-shaped runway. So, you change the lighting, you bring in some seating. So that was the concept for this venue. And yeah, I was working on trying to model that in SketchUp.
That does sound memorable.
Yeah. So I got so far as to stub out let's call it a massing model that I then essentially kind of put into wireframe mode or hidden line mode, and then went into Photoshop and did a lot of the embellishments in Photoshop. But I got done in probably 2 nights what I thought was going to take me a week to model and render in Studio Max. And the initial thing that I sent was really just a kind of progress draft, because I didn't think it was quite at the level that I was
not finished.
And they said, "This is great. Thanks so much."
Boom.
Nailed it. So yeah, and
that's cool.
So many experiences like that early on.
Opposite side of that same coin, what was your most recent thing you have modeled?
Treehouse.
Was that just today?
No. No. We're working on getting a treehouse built in the front yard. Yeah.
That's awesome. Like a lot of people got something like that. Their shed, outhouse, treehouse, whatever, doghouse.
Yep.
Definitely happened.
That was the latest thing.
So this might tie into that, or actually this may be back to your last answer, but what has been the most impactful SketchUp model you've been part of? Is it that one that changed the way your entire firm worked?
Gosh. Okay. We might have to edit this out. No, so there have been some very memorable projects over the years. I think some that so there's one I could not believe I was working on. I was like pinching myself, and it was the SketchUp model that we drew for the Secret Service that was used for the security and event planning for Obama's inauguration.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So White House in the background, stage fully modeled.
That's a hard one to top right there.
Whole audience of chairs. I mean, it's 400 megabytes worth of folding chairs. AV towers with camera equipment. All the stage and rigging for all the seating and rigging for the stage, and that was used for line of sight, contingency planning, a whole bunch of different things.
Wow, that's a good answer.
That was memorable.
A good answer right there.
I still very clearly can see that model.
All right, so what is in your opinion, the best SketchUp model you've made?
Ooh. Goodness. Oh, okay. I'm tempted to just ask you what you mean by best, but I think maybe that's subjective.
In your opinion, yeah. What is the one that you step back and you're like, I did that? Not because of the importance, like you said, that modeling the inauguration, that's like a thing where you're like, ooh, I'm a big deal. But like where you looked at it and you're like, dang, I didn't know how I was going to do that. That turned out awesome. Gosh. I'm challenging you differently from other people.
No, this is good. So there are a couple projects I look back on, and I just kind of think to myself, that was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. It was really hard. And in order to get from kind of nothing to something, there was a lot of creativity, a lot of invention, a lot of problem solving that I kind of had to bring to the table. And hope, I'm assuming people can kind of relate to that. And I think one of those projects that stands out in my mind is the project we did for True Style doors. So a whole bunch of dynamic components that we built for True Style doors, and some of the dynamic component formulas that I had to figure out to account for some of the complexity for that project. That was some of the most difficult work I've ever done in SketchUp. That and the stuff we did for NanoWall, because those products are really incredible products, and the amount of customization, the number of different ways that you can configure or reconfigure those products is pretty astounding. And the logic behind how those companies then go and manufacture those products based on those specifications, also kind of mind-blowing. But taking that and trying to translate that into a dynamically configurable SketchUp component was a project. That was cool.
There's definitely something about getting done with a dynamic component. I mean, a SketchUp model that you didn't know how to tackle and then you did it is awesome. But there's another level where you're like, I made it work.
Yeah.
My formulas worked. It happened. And there's definitely something about that where it's like, it's another level of, pat yourself on the back for that one.
Totally. And, if I were to answer it from a more purist perspective, SketchUp model, I had an experience not that long. This was a couple months ago. I was in Los Angeles, and I was staying at a hotel near LAX. I want to say it was maybe like a Residence Inn or something. And the headboard above the bed in the hotel room, the theme for the hotel was a kind of, I don't know, almost like an Art Deco-y kind of, but there was a lot of cool art and architecture and architectural drawings. And above the bed on the headboard, there's a kind of blueprinty looking, architectural drawing. That's a montage. It's like a collage of different LA things, including the tower at LA, the building at LAX. The futurist building or something.
The domey looking.
Yeah, the domey looking.
Like
thing.
a restaurant or something.
It has a name that's so obvious that it's escaping me. But I think it's something like the futurist building or something. Anyway,
I know the building you're talking about. Yeah.
So it's that building in the collage, but I look a little closer and it's obvious to me that the image is an image that was generated in SketchUp. It's the blueprint style,
Right.
with some edge treatments. The edge extensions were turned on, endpoints were turned on, and so it's basically a hidden line drawing with the blueprint style assigned, with a couple of other style settings toggled. And I'm looking at the thing, and it's the model of the building that I drew for Google Earth. That's on 3D Warehouse. I'm just like, I know that's it. And I know that's it. And I know that's it because I remember drawing that thing 90% with the pencil tool,
Stitching
triangles together.
Yep.
And I was looking at the endpoints, the thickened endpoints on the curves of the arc. And I was like, yeah, I remember drawing every single one of those.
It all comes back around full circle.
And so I had that experience. I had
cool.
that experience recently, and that was kind of trippy. That was just
That's
oh,
impressive.
okay, go you. So,
You did it.
Anyway, that was it.
You made it onto the headboard.
But that was
a lot
another.
of people can't say that.
That was another very tricky project that ultimately was just brute forced with the pencil tool. Yeah.
That's a term I have used several times.
Is it?
People call me out on the term brute force modeling. Like,
brute
this isn't
force
going to be
modeling.
elegant, you guys.
No,
but it's going to get done.
I'm going to put my headphones on.
That's right.
I'm going to get my playlist going, my CAD playlist going, and I'm just going to crank this thing out. I'm not going to think about it. I just, it's going to take an hour. But
look away.
I can draw a lot of triangles in an hour.
That's right.
A lot of triangles.
I don't know if you feel this way, but I have said before that I find something almost soothing about like manually stitching a gap in geometry, and like there's something about it.
It's
like
meditative.
satisfying.
Yeah, there's something very meditative about it.
And you run over it with the smooth tool, and it's all it's good. It's
we
good
should
stuff.
we should lab at it. We should get a couple people in, hook them up to some heart rate monitors and some brain some brain scanners, like a PET scan and a heart rate monitor, and just see if that maybe the whole new market opportunity.
It could be.
SketchUp as a meditative therapy.
Yeah, there's a sensory thing there.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. Flip side of that coin. What's your worst SketchUp model? And this is when you get to like be hard on yourself. It's okay for our enjoyment.
Ooh.
When did you fall short?
Yeah. No. I mean, look. Like I said, if I were to go back and look at my first SketchUp model ever, that thing is pretty embarrassing.
I'm sure there's something more recently where you're like, you look back and you're like, why did I do that way? Or, ooh, I can't believe I did that.
Well, that's true of every model, frankly. I mean, and that's, as a SketchUp trainer, I would try to offer that to people. I would try to say, look, if you're trying to learn SketchUp, draw the bookcase, kind of a classic challenge, right? But then don't go and try to draw a table or a chair or a window or a door. The next step is draw the bookcase again.
Right. Make it better.
Do it differently. Right? One of the things about SketchUp that's really so beautiful that I think really resonates with all of us is there isn't a bookcase tool. Right? Mm-hmm. To draw a bookcase, it's a function of pencil tool, rectangle tool, push-pull tool. Take your pick. Mm-hmm. And the first line you draw, that's up to you. Is the first line the top? Is it the bottom? Is it the back? Is it the side? And so to say that there's a right way to draw a bookcase, I'm less a fan of that. There's 1,000 ways to draw a bookcase. What's beautiful about SketchUp is whatever way you think about how you would approach the process of drawing a bookcase, chances are we offer you the opportunity to draw a bookcase that way. Mm-hmm. That said, there's another kind of piece to that, which is to draw a bookcase, you're not using the one bookcase tool. You're using a number of different tools in combination with each other. And when I think about that kind of like playing chess too, for example. Chess isn't about just having one piece on the board. It's not about just knowing what the pawn does or what the rook does. It's about knowing how all of those individual pieces on the board, like what the rules are for every single individual piece on the board. And then ultimately learning how to use those pieces in combination with each other to achieve an outcome. And SketchUp is very much the same way. It's learn the pencil tool, learn everything you can about the pencil tool and the rectangle tool and the push-pull tool and every other tool. But at that point, you haven't learned how to use SketchUp. Right. You've learned how to use SketchUp when you have used have learned to use those tools in combination with each other to achieve an outcome. And if the first time you tried drawing the bookcase, you use those tools in one combination, I guarantee you that throughout the course of drawing that bookcase, you're learning something as you go, such that if you were to start to draw that bookcase a second time, chances are you're going to draw it differently.
Right.
And again, objectively, is that better? Is it worse? It's not for me to decide. It's for you to decide. But you might draw it faster. You might come up with a way to draw it more accurately, more efficiently, more quickly, right? And so that to me, I think, is something that if I were to look back at any SketchUp model I've ever created, I would look at that and I'd be like, I could do that again, way better.
Absolutely. And that's
way
one
better
of the questions.
The second time.
People ask that all the time, what's the best thing to start with? And I always say, don't do something you care about. That's the biggest thing, because
that's good advice.
It's never going to be good enough and you're going to get frustrated.
That's really good advice.
Start with something that is manageable and you don't mind doing again because of that one thing. You go in, don't model your house, don't model your dream house, don't model the car you love, go do a doghouse, and make something like that doesn't matter, because just that you're going to get done. You're going to like, wow, I could have done that a lot different, a lot better. Yeah. And you will.
And start small, do the bookcase, then do the table. Right. Well, do the bookcase, then do the bookcase, then do the bookcase, then do the table.
Do the bookcases, then the tables.
And then do the living room. And then do
work
half of the house, and then do the whole house, right?
And I think that's and not just here, but having done software training for different software, it's you can't help but feel bad for people because they're like, I couldn't model this 6,000 square foot custom home, and I just installed SketchUp yesterday. Like, well, you're right. Yeah. You can't. I'm sorry.
I would not have been that successful if that were my first project either. So
all right, so this one's gonna resonate. You're gonna have to, I'm gonna challenge you to come to the one answer, because the last question I ask is, what's the thing that you see new users doing wrong that you want to correct everyone on?
Oh my God.
And like I said, I'm challenging you because as a trainer you got a dozen, I know, but what's the number one thing that people have to do in SketchUp they don't do when they start out?
I am so inclined to just pass on this one. I'm so bad at the one. I'm so bad at answering the question where it's like, what's the one thing? So bad at that. It's a challenge I presently struggle with. Okay. trying to be a little nicer to myself.
Because I know you've seen some stuff.
I'm going through 100 things right now, and there are some things that are so fundamental, so fun so I'm going back to the classroom. I'm in the classroom. There's the user over there that's just like, and just, if I just keep clicking, it'll solve the problem. Right. This kind of thing. And the times when I've had to intervene physically intervene, are the times when if I click this, will something bad happen?
It depends on where you click.
Are the times when someone just will not. I don't want to. If I click,
just put it in the middle there.
If I click up here, is that okay? Yeah. Are the times when someone will not let go?
Right.
They won't let go.
Click and hold.
Of the mouse button. And I've had to come over and I've had to just be like, do you mind if I just, can I
touch your person?
Is it okay? Yeah. Is it okay if can I just lift that up?
It's a hard thing that we hit right up front is click and release, right?
And who it's hard. And I know who it is, and I have a tremendous amount of empathy. I'm not mad. Not mad. It's Photoshop users. You can't use the brush tool in Photoshop with a click and let go. You got to hold the button down the whole time you're brushing, right? And that almost invariably it's a pattern that's come from some other
it's a learned
thing,
behavior.
And there's a world of functionality that opens up to you, whether it's modifiers, inference locking, the ability to input measurements in between operations. It's click and let go, move the mouse, click and let go. I've said it.
Solid. That's advice that could never hurt you.
Yeah. So just learn to let go. Learn to let go. That's
all right. On that note,
yeah.
We will call this. We will wrap this
that
up.
it?
Thank you very much, Mike.
You're welcome.
This has been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot about you.
Oh, well,
maybe a little bit about myself.
I'm much more comfortable talking about SketchUp than I am talking about myself. So this was an experience, but
you did a great job.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. But we need that back though.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Awesome. Thank you.